Hello everyone. I am trying this lecture again. I just recorded it and then my computer malfunctioned. I've been having a lot of these recently. I just spent 2 hours on the phone with tech support. It was a great morning. It's been real delightful. Hopefully this is kind of an experiment for myself because as you can see, my cursor here is blinking. Who knows why that is? Not to inundate you with my problems, but I'm curious to see whether my Wi-Fi drops out or not. This blinking cursor, I can deal with that. But the Wi-Fi keeps dropping. Anyway, so what I wanted to talk to you about today in this briefish lecture is what is called temporal motivation theory. Now, what this actually has to do with is you'll see here this kind of formula. And I'm going to kind of go through this, and this is a way of thinking about the projects for this class, projects in general, or even kind of like generalized life goals, okay? And this temporal motivation theory is a way of almost picturing visually, or almost mathematically, a way in which you can see the motivations that you have toward projects that you're working on. Okay. Now, in this theory, so I had already written this out in the lecture that got deleted. You'll see this kind of scribble here, but this should work for us. Now, in this temporal motivation theory, or TMT, as up here, you'll see this. Here's an A, here's an E, here's a V, here's gamma, and then here is D. These two, why did they use gamma? Because as you'll see here, both of their functions here in the denominator both start with D, so you can't have two D's, so they used gamma. So it's not an F, it's G, gamma, in the Greek. A here, in this formula, A is about the attractiveness, let's say, of a project, of a goal, of something that you're working on, okay? Now, it doesn't mean like physical attractiveness. It means kind of like mental or emotional attractiveness. Like, why are you what is the attractiveness about, let's say, a project that you're doing? Now, these authors worked out this model around 2006. And I think it's kind of interesting, and I think it's of some value, so I wanted to share it with you. So here, there's attractiveness. E in our formula here in the numerator, E is expectancy, V here is value, and then in our denominator we have gamma is discounting, and then D is delay. Now, what do all of these mean? Okay, so the general attractiveness or appeal, okay, of a project that you're working on can be configured as a function of the expectancy you have multiplied by the value that the project has to you, and then the divided by the discounting that you have of that project multiplied by the delay of that project. Now, what do all of these things mean? Now, in terms of expectancy, okay, in terms of expectancy, we can think of expectancy as what do we expect to gain from doing this or that project, okay? So when you're doing a project, let's say a project for class, okay, versus a project like for your job or even a personal project, like maybe you're doing a painting or you're learning how to do photography or something, what you want to do in order to increase expectancy, okay, is to try to make that task seem easier, however that's going to work for you. Now, there are a couple ways you can do this. In terms of expectancy, one way to do that is to not think of the cumulative project, the whole thing, right? If I say, okay, you're going to write a scientific paper for this class, that expectancy might kind of scare you. You might think, oh man, that's a huge project. The idea here is to break it down into manageable chunks. Okay, so like for example, getting a rough draft done of that project, okay, increases the expectancy of it. Okay, a rough draft of a project is much easier to kind of mentally handle than the entire project all at once. One thing that I do, like when I'm writing a book, and this is just, I mean, this is just how books are organized, but I don't think of the entire book, right? I don't think, oh my gosh, I have to write 400 pages. I think of it in terms of chapters, okay? And I break that down into chapters because each chapter is mentally much more manageable than trying to think of the entire book. I mean, even when writing a novel, I know that novelists do this too. They kind of have a general sense of where they want the book to go, okay? So the expectancy is this book, okay? But it's broken down into pages, into chapters, into scenes and sequences, so that mentally the writer can kind of get their mind around what they're doing as they're doing it, okay? Another tip, I would say, that helps with expectancy, with increasing the value of that, is to think of writing as a process that you have to do in order to get better at it, right? So you think of it like this: the more I write, the more I practice, the more papers. I mean, all of you have taken almost 2 years now of college, right, to get into the 300 level class. So you know what goes into it. So you know that you're a better writer now than you were as a freshman, but you know that with a couple more semesters work, right, you're going to be an even better writer, okay? So it's about understanding that it's a process. So that should hopefully increase the expectancy where you're not putting so much pressure on yourself to be a perfect writer, because nobody's a perfect writer. Nobody just sits down and writes, Twelfth Night or Othello or Macbeth, right? Like Shakespeare does. He worked at it. It was a process. There are drafts. You're constantly engaging the process as you're doing it, okay? Now, another thing that can kind of help with expectancy is to think of yourself as a writer, right? Don't think of yourself as somebody who can't write. Think of yourself as somebody trying to build the skills inherent to writing, and therefore you are participating in this project called writing, okay? It's not like, so you're not fighting this entire system, okay? You're thinking of yourself as somebody learning and as a writer. I mean, that is, if you do sports, right? People will idolize certain sports figures because that helps them to set a kind of mental ideal or a mental goal. When I used to box, one of my favorite boxers was Manny Pacquiao. He was so good, so fast, and I would watch tape on him, and I would watch videos of him fight, and I would think, oh, okay, that's what I need to model myself on. Or a fighter like Willie Pep, who's a great defensive fighter. I think, oh, I'd watch his footwork, and I would think, okay, that's what I need to try to emulate. Okay, it's the same thing with writers, right? You read a great writer, and you think, oh, well, that's something to aspire to. So all of these factors will help to increase the value of the expectancy of the projects you're working on. Now, value, this other function here in our numerator, this is something that is kind of personal for you, but what do you expect to get out of this project? Why do you value it? How do you value it? Okay. Now, sometimes the value of a project is a simple function of being assigned that project. So when I say, okay, you're going to do a grant project, you're going to do this, right? The value of it is, okay, I want to do it, so I pass this class. I want to do it so I get a good grade. I want to do it so I learn something, right? All of those can be intrinsic values to how you assess or find attractive that project, okay? So think of it like this. The value that you add to a project as you're doing it could be something as simple as almost bribing yourself, right? So the way I break this down comes into this idea down here of word count. I just wrote out 300 and 600 here because they're pretty digestible word count goals. And One thing I said, and I basically mentioned this in the prior video that's now in the void. Since all of you pretty much are addicted to your cell phones, and don't worry, most human beings are. They're actually cell phones are actually designed to be addictive. Everything about them is designed intentionally to make you pay attention to the phone. Anyway, um, think of it like this: put your cell phone on mute, so it's not going to notify you if you get an email or a text or whatever. And then, as you're working on a project, okay, every 300 words, every 600 words, whatever, okay, make it a point. When I write 300 words, I can turn my cell phone on or whatever and check, talk to my friends, email them, ha ha ha, emoji emoji, okay. Then I will put it back on silent or mute or whatever, and then I'm going to write another 300 words. Then I can check it again, okay? Or maybe it's after every 600 or every 900 words per day, I'm done, right? That is my reward. So it's almost like you're training yourself to value the work because of the reward that you're going to get from finishing that day's portion, okay? Now, this is something that is really something that most people, I think, tend to do. But there was a really interesting study done. It was actually a very long-term study. I believe it was done in the 70s. But it's essentially called the marshmallow test. And this group of researchers, what they did, they took some kids, I think between the ages of 3 and 5. And they told the kids, okay, here's some marshmallows. They put them out on the table. And kids like marshmallows. I don't know why. I think they're disgusting. But kids like marshmallows. And the researchers said, okay, kids, I will give you one marshmallow now, instant gratification, or if you wait an hour, you can have 3. And who doesn't want more marshmallows, right? So some of the kids said, give me marshmallow now. Some of the kids said, okay, I'll wait. Now, as you know, kids have terrible impulse control, especially in the ages of 3 to 5. I mean, they're just basically almost reflex machines, okay? But this idea of instant versus delayed gratification plays into this sense of value, because what they found was later in life, they did a long-term study, and later in life, they found that those kids who were able to delay gratification, who said, okay, I'll wait an hour for my 3 marshmallows, those kids tended to have, and this is statistically significant, they tended to have a much higher success rate in terms of college education, degrees, job, marriage being satisfied in their marriages, overall income. So there was this really interesting correlation between, as a child, having better impulse control, and later in adult life, having more success. So there does seem to be some concrete data about this idea, okay? So the idea of delaying gratification. I mean, of course, it's much easier when you're writing a paper to just say, oh, I'm just going to watch YouTube videos. Oh, I don't want to do it. It's a pain. Writing is hard. So you have to really, kind of train yourself to place the value on the project as you see fit. If it's every 300 words, every 600 words, and you eat some chocolate, if you like chocolate, okay, great. Ice cream, great. Reward yourself as you will. When I used to smoke, this is a terrible example, but when I used to smoke and I would write, my dissertations or papers or whatever, I would do about 500 words, and then I would go have a cigarette. And I'd say, okay, at 500 words, you get to go do something fun, okay? Not the best, not the healthiest example, but that's how it works. So going on to discounting. Now, this sense of discounting actually has to do with being aware of yourself, once again, kind of as writing, or as a writer, okay, and being mindful of these future rewards, okay? So this works kind of contrarily to the ideas of expectancy and value. Because if you're discounting, like if the gamma function here is higher than your valuation function, it's kind of like fractions, okay? So up here, if your numerator is lower than your denominator, then what happens is the attractiveness of the project lessens, okay? So if I have, 1 over 1 here, right? Then the attractiveness might be 1, so if these balance out. But if the attractiveness and value, or the expectancy and value of the project is 1 versus, the discounting of that project, if discounting it's higher, notice that the attractiveness now is 1 over 4, 25%. So it's much less because I'm discounting, or I'm not, valuing properly the project that I'm doing. So a lot of this has to do with kind of impulsive or impulsivity, an impulsive drive or being impulsive. If you're too impulsive and you don't have, the focus or the applied focus, right, that's going to increase the discounting or gamma function. And therefore, the attractiveness of a project might be lessened. Now, delay, that's simply about procrastination. If the delay, if you constantly say, oh, I'm too busy, oh, I don't want to do it, oh, I'm going to delay this project, right, because I don't value it as much, or I don't have as high expectations of it, the delay function, once again, decreases the attractiveness of that project. Now, procrastination, as I've said many a time, is one of the worst habits you can have as an adult, as a student, as a parent, as an employee somewhere. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible habit to have. Okay, so and there are attacks on procrastination that go back thousands of years. The Roman orator Cicero, he attacked the idea of procrastination. Right, he's a very prolific author. In his sixth Philippic, or Philippic would be a kind of attack on something. He was attacking Mark Antony, friend of Julius Caesar, who then eventually had Cicero killed as a political opponent. But Cicero, in 44 BCE, was attacking procrastination. Hesiod, one of the earliest Greek writers we know of, in his book Works and Days, spoiler alert, it's a little boring. Go read Theogony instead. If you're a lit major, you've probably read these, but you can go read Works and Days by Hesiod and see that he also attacks procrastination. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the holy texts of kind of early Hinduism, Krishna, one of the god figures, lists procrastination along with vulgarity, laziness, wickedness, and deceitfulness. He says they're all sins. And he says human beings who have these qualities will be reincarnated only as beasts and insects. So, not a very good thing to constantly delay or procrastinate the projects we're working on. Okay, so once again, coming back to this word count thing, okay, if you are churning out 300 words, 600 words, whatever, 900, 1,500 words a day, right, make that a habit, make that a rule. You will start to value and expect better things from the projects you're working on. The discounting of those projects will go down because you think, oh, okay, I'm getting these projects done. I'm ahead of time. I now have an extra week ahead of the deadline. Instead of waiting till the last minute, delaying it, discounting it, and saying, oh, I'll just stay up all night doing it the night before. That's a terrible habit, and your papers, I promise you, won't be very good as a result of that. Okay? So, all of these things work together, I think, to kind of show how the attractiveness of certain projects function. I wrote up here, and you can kind of see it, there's a little P and an A. And I was just saying for myself that the delay function, okay, in what I write, I think of things in this same way too. when I'm writing. Like if I'm writing a poem, so that would be attractiveness sub P for poem versus attractiveness sub A for academic article. Very often, I see academic articles as more attractive or valuable versus poetry because I can write academic articles and for my career get ahead a lot more easily and a lot better than by writing poems. It doesn't mean that I don't write poems, but in terms of discounting and delay, right? Um, those functions here might be a little bit higher in a poem versus in an academic article because I have to write both just for my job and for my vocation. So even when I apply these things to myself and what I write and what I do, I still find value in this TMT model. And hopefully it can kind of help you become self-aware of yourself as a writer, yourself as a student, yourself as a person with goals and also with deadlines. Okay, because finishing projects well in advance of the deadline is going to give you time, first of all, to kind of relax, to go have a marshmallow, to go write a poem, to go do whatever it is you do. Okay, and then you have more time to edit. Therefore, the overall attractiveness, the overall product that you're producing, be it a research paper, a poem, a painting, whatever, is going to be higher. So therefore, in the future projects will have a higher attractiveness value because your expectancy and valuation criteria are necessarily higher than the discounting and delay criteria. Okay, so this is just, once again, it's about motivation. It's about trying to leave off procrastination. It's trying to build better habits in yourselves as writers. And I just think it's a kind of interesting little heuristic that you can kind of think about as you go forward toward toward your senior year and graduating. And then maybe graduate school, maybe then, some lucrative career in whatever field you choose to do. So I don't know. I just thought it was kind of interesting heuristic. I thought I'd share it with you. And I pray to God, all the gods that there are, that when I hit this pause button, that this records and works. So thank you.